So I'm recording this on Friday morning. This is before Mars and Venus have entered Aquarius, so I only know what I know at this moment. But I can imagine things probably feel both, I don't want to say worse, but pretty good now that Mars and Venus are out of Capricorn. Uh, Pluto's the real deal, and Mars and Venus on top of Pluto was a lot. We had Venus on top of Pluto for like 3 or 4 months. A lot of this week is taking in things. For example, have you ever been with this Venus retrograde? We had Venus go through Capricorn. We had those eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus. Venus then went up to Pluto, stationed retrograde. We had Mercury enter shadow with a Mercury retrograde. Venus retrograded, stationed direct. Then Mars entered the game. Then Mars and Venus went through Pluto, or went through Capricorn. Then they conjoined Pluto. And it's like, there's so much going on in the sign of Capricorn. It's kind of like when you're in the middle of, I can't think of anything better than literally like a court analogy would be like, you're getting in all this information, this changes, that changes. And it's not until something is finished and it's done and you get out of that courtroom where you can kind of process all of it. Or maybe if you got in an argument with someone, or if you are debating something, when you're in the middle of something, you can't process information versus once it's all done and wrapped up and you're moving on, no matter what happens, you can then start to process things. And I think this is what this week is about, is like really just kind of processing everything that just really happened over this past like 3 or 4 months, with also a big hint of like 2020 stuff coming up, but we'll talk about that. This week is moderately chill, guys. Now, I know I'm going to get people in the fucking comments being like, what are you talking about, Cameron? This week was crazy. According to astrology, it's chill. I don't know what to tell you. And I'm going to stick with the astrology. So this week's going to be pretty chill. Again, I don't know what Mars and Venus going to Aquarius is going to be like. I'm recording this before that happens, and I'm sure it's going to be crazy because I've been talking about that for a while. But this is once that happens. Once Mars and Venus go into Aquarius, then that's what we're talking about with this week. But we start Monday off. Like I said on last week, the moon is just going to be in Taurus. It'll square Mars and Venus and then make that conjunction to Uranus. Then as we get into Monday, the moon will sextile Jupiter, make a square to Saturn before it conjoins the North Node. So here's the thing. I want to make myself a little bit bigger here. There we go. So let's go backwards here. We get into Monday morning. And on Monday morning, the moon's going to be making the sextile to Jupiter, where there is this, it's the moon in Taurus, right? The moon's exalted in Taurus. The moon feels nourished and comfortable and secure and safe here. And the moon loves feeling safe and secure. The moon's sextiling Jupiter, where Jupiter is in Pisces, but right now it's combust, which means it's really close to the sun. So you can't really see it. So it's kind of like the way to talk about Jupiter combust is like you feel good, but you don't understand why or where it's coming from. And I think this moon in Taurus sextiling Jupiter in Pisces, there is this nourished, comfortable, safe feeling. How long it lasts, I don't know. But I think waking up on Monday morning, there is this kind of like, okay, I feel comfortable, I feel safe, I feel like I got my thing going on. But as we progress through the day, we'll then have the moon make this square to Saturn where, okay, cool, you got your shit. Now you have responsibilities to take care of. For example, I was kind of thinking about this. I've tried to record this horoscope a few times. I've got a lot to complain about. I'm trying not to complain about things. But this moon sextiling Jupiter is kind of like, maybe you get a new job and you're making more money, but you also have bills and you're in debt. So it's kind of like, oh, great, moon sextile Jupiter. I'm making more money. This feels good, but moon's going to square Saturn. That shit's got to go somewhere. You've got bills to pay, essentially. So as the moon squares Saturn, this is really important to understand. Well, it's something I've been thinking a lot about, this Taurus Aquarius stuff, is like safe boundaries. Like, with Saturn and Aquarius, clearly there's an intellectual divide, in case you haven't been able to tell. And people are clearly split on a lot of things, and people are, something I was thinking about, and I know I'm going to say this and so many of you are going to get offended. But I thought, this is me thinking everything in a comical way. Which some people get really upset when you think of anything funny, because nothing can be funny anymore and everything has to be really serious. But the whole Putin thing seems like it's super cancel culture. Like everyone's like, yeah, let's cancel. It's literally like canceling Putin. And I just thought that was funny because we've just seen that theme with Saturn and Aquarius of like mob mentality against people. And again, I'm kind of for it because, I don't agree with the Russian invasion, but it's just funny. In Saturn and Aquarius, this whole Aquarius thing is there's this kind of like, hey, there's a group mentality a part of things, and you're either with this group or with that group, and it doesn't matter if you're not even with one of them. People are gonna. That's what's really frustrating to think about right now too. Is it doesn't matter what you believe or think. People will just pin you to whatever side that they want to, whatever's convenient. But I look at this moon in Taurus squaring Saturn is like, moon in Taurus, our feelings, what we're reflecting, where emotionally where we're at in the moment. It's in Taurus. There's a sense of being centered, of grounded, maybe even stubborn. But it's going to square Saturn in Aquarius. There's this immovable, immovable is a really good word, but I would say that's more of an emotional frustration, an emotional, what's the word I'm looking for? A stubbornness, really, of not wanting to listen to an authority or listen to, Saturn Aquarius is like, it's got to be this way or that way, and there's no other way to do it. And the moon in Taurus squaring is like, no, I'm going to stay here. This is where I feel comfortable. This is where I feel safe. So I think on Monday, the moon sextiling Jupiter is kind of like, hey, this is good. I like where this is going. And that moon squaring Saturn is, you're going to have to confront what that means, right? So for example, I just made that analogy of like, hey, you're making more money, but you've got responsibilities to pay. Well, are you paying off all the debt that you owe, or are you paying off like just a little bit of the debt you owe? For example, this is actually true. I owe Wells Fargo like $200 because like I closed an account that was like negative because I fucking hate Wells Fargo. And me being a petty Jupiter and Capricorn in the second house, Wells Fargo calls me every day. And I've calculated how much a typical customer service sales rep makes. And I've tracked how long it takes to make that phone call and how many minutes and hours and I'm pretty much waiting for Wells Fargo to, cost them more to try to get their money from me. Then I'll actually pay what I owe because I fucking hate Wells Fargo and big banks. So they've been calling me for over a year now, but they're only halfway to the bill. By December of 2022, it should have cost more to get my money from me than it would be to get my money. So anyway, that's just me being petty and stubborn, but that's very moon in Taurus squaring Saturn Aquarius. It's like, you know what? I'll give you what you need, but on my own time. We'll do it on my own time when I feel comfortable. So I think on Monday, there's going to be this balance of what's going to make you feel comfortable and safe and secure, but you also have to confront an authority, a responsibility. And I think too, with the Saturn Aquarius stuff is, you guys cannot get caught in the polarization. It's really easy to get caught in the polarization. And I think, unfortunately, I am almost on my knees praying to the Lord, thank you for letting me delete Twitter before this World War III's popped off, because people are just much more concerned about literally attacking one another than they are even about understanding why the situation at hand is at hand. So I think the Saturn and Aquarius trap is pinning, everyone against each other, which is a failed strategy, by the way. But this moon, squaring Saturn is definitely going to be this kind of like resisting is a good word to look at when it comes to moving, right? Taurus is very like, I'm comfortable. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to get out of my position. And Saturn and Aquarius just really isn't going to like that. So I think it's just going to be important to, know where you have to kind of deal with an authority and a seriousness, but I almost kind of look at it as like the moon makes the sextile to Jupiter. It's going to hit the North Node. I don't think we're moving. You know what I mean? Like the moon, sure, Saturn's in the superior position, but like the moon is our emotions. We're emotional creatures that act out of we might think that we're rational actors, but we're not. We base most of our decisions based off of emotion. There are people, talk to anybody in a fucking relationship, and just the shit I hear from people, it's people will make a decision based off their emotions more than they will off facts and logic. That's just true. And so I think on Monday, this moon squaring Saturn is know where your emotions might be getting in the way. I think it's going to be important to maybe challenge a lot of the authority stuff and to challenge the way that things should go based off how comfortable you feel, but just don't let it get too into your head, because then we have the moon conjoining the North Node going into Monday night. The North Node's like around Algol at this point. So there's going to be this you're going to get a reward from being stubborn. You're going to get a reward from being in place. You're going to get a reward from that. And I think as the moon's on the North Node, there's this hyper pull to this is what I want. This is what I desire. I'm going to get it any way that I want to. And while there is a benefit to that, I think it's going to be up to you guys to really find out where to place that in your life. Don't let that all-encompassing emotion, which moon on the North Node is very all-encompassing emotion, just don't let that direct you, right? For example, if you can feel like you want revenge or pettiness or any of this stuff, I'm talking about Algol stuff here, but just know where to guide yourself, right? The moon is going to be, this actually brings us into Tuesday. The The moon's going to conjoin the north node. There's just going to be this hyperfixation to go in a specific direction, or to remain fixed on what you're doing. But then we go into Tuesday. And as we get into Tuesday morning, early Tuesday morning, the moon will make a square to Mercury before it then enters Gemini and starts to trine Mars and Venus. And like I said, this isn't really a big week. It's all of those lunar transits. But again, this is kind of just taking it all in. What have we been going through over the past 4 months? Now that we've wrapped it up, we're on to something else. So yeah, the moon will make this square to Mercury. This is super early. This is like clearly 3 a.m., so like 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That moon in Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius. Mercury in Aquarius, again, the mental gymnastics, something I've been thinking a lot more about is technology with Aquarius and man-made technology, and how most of the time technology is invented to fix other technology that we invented. And I look at Mercury in Aquarius as kind of like, again, Mercury is about the way that we think. Mercury is about our mentalities, and it's fixated right now. It's also squaring the nodes. It's for example, I always forgot what the stages of grief, I think it is. Is it the stages of grief where it's like denial's the first thing, right? I really look at that Mercury in Aquarius as like going through those stages of grief until you get to that point of acceptance. And that might be when Mercury goes into Pisces. But I think this moon in Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius is like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. That's like moon and Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius. You can give someone every rhyme or reason why you should think this, or why this is right, or this and that. And if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. That's just how it goes. And I think with this moon and Taurus squaring Mercury in Aquarius, like people are going to do what they're going to do, and you're going to have to get the fuck over that. Things are going to happen. And I mean, you could, applying this in a more personal way, you might have, for example, all this Aquarius stuff. It's like, you might have the logistics and the plans and the things that you want, but it's going to go the way it's going to go. Right? Something I've been really and I say meditating, as if I fucking sit crisscross. I meditate throughout my whole day. I'm always reflecting on life and everything. But I've been reflecting a lot about how, this fate and this free will thing that we like to argue in astrology, and how, we are brainwashed in this country to think that, free will is everything. Well, even in this country, even in this whole world, that we have free will and autonomy over all of this stuff, and we have complete control. And I think we do have quite a level of free will. But when I think of fate as not necessarily like you are being punished by the universe, or it's about you. People make fate about them, like, you deserve this, or you are like, this happened because of you, or whatever. And I've been thinking much more about, really sitting on the idea that I am just a passenger. I have a lot of I don't want to say I have a lot of Capricorn placements, but I have my ascendant ruler is in Capricorn, and I like to plan everything. I have fucking plans for a week, month, 2 months, 3 years, 5 years. I got plans for all that shit, but that's not up to me, right? And I think. I've been, again, this is why I reflect, like, I'm just a passenger, and I just have to let things go where they're going to go. And I look at this Taurus stuff, right? And the South Node in Scorpio, we have to release and surrender the control that we want over things. And that North Node in Taurus, like, hey, it is the way that it is. And I think this moon squaring Mercury is it takes a while to get to the level of mental acceptance, right? There's a lot of resistance, or there's a lot of mental gymnastics, or seeing things this way, or just you can, if you got a plan to do something, and then the universe clearly comes in and wrecks those plans, you can sit here and stress yourself out and go, okay, well, we got to change this, and that, or you can go, okay, I guess that's just how we're going to do it then. Let things go with the flow. And I think a lot of people are like, I go with the flow. I don't think you guys really do. I think you guys actually resist the flow most of the time. Like a lot of. I could start bagging on people. I'm not going to do that. But I think there's this, in order to go with the flow, you have to really kind of resist control. You have to surrender control. You have to be literally accepting of this stuff. And again, this is why I brought this up. I've been really reflecting on just being a passenger, just being a vessel. Like, I'm just along for the I'm just along for the ride. This goes back to one of my delineation episodes about purpose. You don't know your purpose. You can live your truth. You can live and you can do what you want. Or you can do what you desire. But your ultimate purpose and role in everything is kind of up to people's perception of you and their interpretation of you, and how they put things together. You're just a passenger, like living whatever the fuck your soul wants you to live. So, like I said, the moon will make this square to Mercury where there's this resistance to acceptance until the moon goes into Gemini later on Tuesday. And the moon's going to make this awesome trine to Mars and Venus. How awesome this is, because again, both of the malefics are in Aquarius. We have Mars, Venus, and Mercury, and Mars, Venus, Saturn, and Mercury in Aquarius. Mars and Venus, or Venus is being enclosed by malefics. So let me bring this up too. This Aquarius part of your chart is much more dynamic than usual. Its ruler is in that sign. And Saturn transits are a little bit different than Saturn going through Aquarius is much more different than Mars going through Aquarius. But Mars, Venus, Saturn, Mercury, and Aquarius, there's a lot to take in there. Mars, the way that we fight, the way that we're acting. Mars in Aquarius, the last time we had Mars in Aquarius was, I just brought that up, 2020, lockdown, isolation, social distancing. I think Mars and Saturn Aquarius, social distancing is like the perfect word. I love that word for Mars and Saturn Aquarius. Detaching from things, escaping from things. As Mars and Venus are in Aquarius, we're doing that, but this time it's kind of fun. It's not just I feel like Mars and Saturn in Aquarius first time was like lockdown. We didn't have a choice versus, I'm not saying there's going to be another lockdown this week. There might be one later on, but that's maybe. But this is much more of going the distance, doing things detached, and enjoying it more. But as the moon goes into Gemini, again, now that we have the North Node out of Gemini, the moon being about our emotions, how we feel, how we're reflecting, we get to actually ask some questions. And I think this is where that level of acceptance kind of comes in. Mercury is also about to go into Pisces, which we'll talk about, but the moon's going to go into Gemini where it's safe to ask questions. The moon in Gemini, it is safe to learn new things rather than just emotionally reacting. I think the big thing with this Ukraine thing too, that I really kind of just want to warn people about is this Jupiter-Neptune thing. You hold everything with a fucking grain of salt. Hold everything with a grain of salt, especially in the media, because the media is just it's almost insane how much everybody has a spin on everything. Hold everything with a grain of salt right now. And I say that because Jupiter's going to conjoin Neptune. It's on its way. We are going to be gaslit over the next few months of a lot of things. But Mars will retrograde later on at the end of this year, and it'll square Neptune, and we'll start to figure out what was a lie and what was the truth. So not to say anything that's going on right now is a lie or is the truth. Just hold it with a grain of salt for the love of God, and don't just react to things. And it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to play with different ideas. And I don't know. This Saturn Aquarius stuff, it's so amazing how, again, I'm so glad I'm not on Twitter, because this country is more, it doesn't matter what happens. We could literally have a different country bomb a completely different country, and here in America, we'll find a reason to attack each other based off that. And it's really it's so pathetic. It's so immature. And I don't know. I see grown men doing this, and it's just I don't know. Get a life. But the moon's going to trine Mars and Venus. The thing that I like about this is we're asking questions, we're feeling different things. The moon's in a mutable sign, right? We're shifting. The way that we feel is going to change based on the way that we express or that we talk about things. And the moon's applying to Mars and Venus in Aquarius. I think there's an understanding here. Mars and Venus in Aquarius. Mars in Aquarius is doing I always think of a rogue shooter of Mars in Aquarius, or a Marine going AWOL, which is pretty much when you leave your post in the middle of a war. And Venus in Aquarius is very again, Venus is value, fun, and enjoyment. And Aquarius is there is a sense of really connecting with your group of people, really connecting with your tribe, as the woke white people like to say. But this moon in Gemini trining Mars and Venus is, there is, what's the word I'm looking for here? I talked about this a couple of weeks ago about Reject Hill at my high school. That we had this hill that everyone sat at, and we called it Reject Hill because it's where all the kids who had no friends went, but they all had friends with each other. All the reject kids were all friends with each other. That's this moon, moon in Gemini, Mars and Venus go into Aquarius. Looks like you're on Reject Hill. But guess what? There's a bunch of other people there with you, and they're, great people to talk to. So I look at this moon in Gemini trining Mars and Venus is like, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to express. And I think that's what's important right now is to talk about things, especially in this Aquarius, with your group of people, with your tribe, with your community. And I just think that's what a lot of Tuesday is expressing, explaining, talking, agreeing though, not like disagreeing at all, agreeing on a lot of things. And that's really Tuesday. Let's go into Wednesday, and the moon is going to make a square to Jupiter before. Oh no, the moon will just make a square to Jupiter because it's still being Gemini, and then Mercury enters Pisces. So let's go to this next day here. We get to Wednesday. Now the moon makes a square to Jupiter, like literally at the exact same time Mercury enters Pisces, which I kind of thought was funny. See, 1518, Mercury enters Pisces, and it's like, yeah, within pretty much like that same hour. So the moon in Gemini squaring Jupiter in Pisces will be kind of funny because the moon in Gemini, it's like, you talk, you ask questions, you're thinking about things, and it squares Jupiter in Pisces, and it might ruin the fun a little bit. Like moon in Gemini squaring Jupiter in Pisces kind of ruins the fun a little bit. Like you don't want to ask questions you don't want the answers to. But Jupiter in Pisces is very like, how do you get calm in this moment? How do you, in this moment, get everything out of your head? Like I always think of like straight up meditation with Pisces because it's about how are you dealing with things in this moment? How are you escaping this environment? And I look at this moon in Gemini squaring Jupiter in Pisces, and there's a certain in meditation, the whole point of the meditation is to shut your fucking brain up and just be. That's the whole point. This moon in Gemini squaring Jupiter in Pisces, the second Mercury goes into Pisces is like it's not like you're just like meditating, all of a sudden the silence hits and you're like, yeah, but the moon's going to square Jupiter and Mercury's going to go into Pisces where it's like you're going to try to meditate. This is for my parents out there. This is like you're going to try to get that calm centered moment, but then all of a sudden your kids barge in. Let's talk about Mercury in Pisces for a second, because one of my favorite tales of Mercury in Pisces was during the beginning of the pandemic. During March, I believe it was around March, we had a Mercury retrograde in Pisces, and Mercury had stationed retrograde on top of Neptune. And like Mercury stationed retrograde on Neptune, retrograde, then went back over Neptune. During that whole time, that was like every day. I think I talked about this too in a past weekly horoscope of like every single day, Trump and Fauci were like, just talking, like making a press conference every day, and no one knew what was going on. Like everyone was like, well, this, and then that, and then this, and then that. And like everyone's like, what, like what's next? With Mercury and Pisces, this is what I actually, like, for example, if you want to hear my shit talk on Mercury and Pisces, it's like, don't over explain things. The details don't matter. With Mercury and Pisces, truly, ignorance is bliss. Like, don't think about it. Just let it happen. Well, this is the thing with, like, for example, holy shit. Have you guys seen Jen Psaki's chart? It is exactly what you think it is. It's insane. Or, for example, Fauci's chart. I think about Fauci's chart because he's got Mercury and Sag. And I think a lot about the Mercury and Sag people who are like big orators or communicators. And the Mercury and Sag people that have a platform of communicating something really know how to botch it. They're really good at it. Same thing with Jen Psaki's chart is so funny. Anyway, I look at this Mercury and Pisces thing is kind of like, Mercury's in detriment, right? And Mercury's about the details and asking the right questions and communicating the right thing. But it's in Jupiter's sign where Jupiter works with ideals and ideas and much more meta topics versus Mercury's much more like micro. With Mercury going into Pisces, it's you'll know when you know. It's the same thing with this Ukraine Russian stuff. You have the news trying to tell you what's going on at this exact minute, even though the mainstream news has literally been wrong. Like they've just been spreading so much misinformation. It's crazy how people still trust. Like they were talking about like the ghost of Kiev, that was false information. That all this other stuff that they're it's pretty much propaganda. And again, I'm really into this stuff too, but I've gotten to the point of we'll know when we know. When Mercury goes into Pisces, it's the same thing with this this pandemic stuff. When Mercury went to Pisces the last time, there was all this confusion and they were saying all these things that they just eventually went back on. And we didn't actually really know what was going on until Mercury left Pisces and we had that Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. So I just kind of look at it as Mercury going to Pisces is don't overthink things, really. I think that's good, and that's much harder than I think people assume, especially with Jupiter and Pisces. I think one of the harder things will just be not to like over idealize certain situations and not exaggerate certain things. Exaggeration's a big thing with this, with Mercury and Pisces or Sagittarius. But as Mercury goes into Pisces, our minds are much more, I think we need to be more focused on creativity, imagination. When I talk about acceptance and denial, Mercury in Pisces is kind of going like, where was I wrong? Mercury in Pisces is like, where can I change? What do I need to see? And sometimes it takes, this is a, I don't know, I'm a big Mac Miller fan, and he has a sample on one of his songs on Faces, if you guys have heard that album. And I don't know what the sample's from, but it says like, in order to use your head, you have to go out of your mind. And I love that saying because it's super Mercury in Pisces. In order to be able to like literally use your head, you got to go out of your mind. There's a certain point of, this is why you get into like the psychedelic community, and they always think that they're, much smarter and better than people because they've been able to open their minds and see things that most people wouldn't imagine. And I think as Mercury goes into Pisces, be open-minded. Let your ideas change, and things aren't going to make sense. That's the thing with Mercury and Pisces. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't have to, though. Like, this is the thing about Pisces and Jupiter and Pisces is it's story time. It's story time, and things don't actually have to make sense. Things don't actually have to, be all, cracked up in your head. Sometimes things just have to happen, right? And you just have to, it's like when you're watching a movie and you think you've got the movie figured out, and then like 45 minutes into it, they change something up. And you're like, fuck, well, now I don't know what's going on. And then that's one of my favorite parts about movies is like when you think you got it figured out and then they show you something and you're like, oh, fuck, well, now I have no idea what's going on. Because it captivates your imagination. It gives you that ability to think bigger when you are wrong, right? So I look at this Mercury. I think this Mercury in Pisces change is going to be really telling because again, that Mercury in Aquarius wants to fight and mental gymnastics it, and then once we get to Mercury in Pisces and the moon's going to square Jupiter, we're going to shut the fuck up and just let things kind of like shut the fuck up and watch the movie. Straight up, just stop talking, watch the movie, let it play out. And then you could formulate your opinions and what you think once the movie's done playing, right? So Mercury enters Pisces, moon's going to square Jupiter. I think on Wednesday, just get out of your head. Stop asking questions you don't want the answers to because you're not going to get it. We go into Thursday. And on Thursday, there we go. We're going to have the moon before it leaves Gemini make this trine to Saturn and square Neptune, which will be a little bit weird. Then the moon will be void for a couple hours before it moves into Cancer. I love the moon in Cancer transit. That's pretty much the exciting thing to look forward to. But on Thursday, let's go ahead and go into Thursday morning here. Moon is going to pretty much be trining Saturn in the morning, which again, it's like, okay, things are making sense. Moon in Gemini, trining Saturn in Aquarius. It's like, all right, like this is tangible. This makes sense. This is where I'm at. Or I should say the moon trine Saturn is much more, again, maybe more constructive, taking like, whatever responsibilities you kind of have to handle. The thing is, I would say it's like things are making sense, but it's like the moon's going to trine Saturn in like first thing in the morning where it's like, okay, feeling a little bit more grounded in reality, but then the moon just squares Neptune all day long before it goes void. The moon squares Neptune and then goes void. Like that to me sounds like, if you guys watch SpongeBob, I think of Neptune as like the orb of confusion. It's kind of just like, if you even know what that is. It's the moon squaring Neptune is there's going to be this moment where something hits you and it doesn't make sense. Neptune, again, you guys are watching me through a really nice camera and lens, which this isn't an actual depiction of what you would see, but it is an actual depiction of what you would see if you were here in person. That's the way I love Neptune for that reason. It just distorts what is like reality in a way that isn't necessarily dishonest, but in a way that doesn't necessarily provide the truth either. And I think this moon in Gemini squaring Neptune and Pisces is again, like when you're watching a magician, when you're watching, especially too like acrobats or, when you are looking for the trick, when you're looking for the illusion, you'll find it. And that might ruin a little bit of the movie magic, but the moon in Gemini squaring Neptune and Pisces is, I think this is kind of like trying to figure out someone's magic trick and not being able to figure it out. Moon squaring Neptune is like, oh, this is all just fake. Let me kind of see like, I don't know if you guys ever seen the people that like float, like they have them here at the Strip. It's like, I don't know. I still don't know how they do this, but it's like they get like they're just floating people. And I love it. It's one of my favorite magic tricks. The people that just like, they're literally just like floating, and you can like put stuff under them and there's nothing under them. They're just like straight up looks like they're floating. And trying to figure it out, in my opinion, ruins the fun of it. But when Thursday moon will, hit Neptune, I think things get kind of confusing. And I don't want to say there's like a spiraling moment, but it's just kind of like, don't expect clear communication, and don't expect people to clearly communicate how they feel. Moon's going to be in Gemini squaring Neptune. It's like they might communicate how they feel, but it may not necessarily come out the right way, or you may not interpret that correctly. So just hold everything with a grain of sand for a minute. You don't have to make super hardcore decisions at any given time. The moon's going to be void, so we'll be kind of like, what? Huh? Like, we'll be kind of lost in the sauce for a minute, but then the moon goes into Cancer, and I'm telling you, you will not hear me say this for a while, probably not until at least like Saturn goes into Pisces, which is another year from now, pretty much like a year exactly. These water transits with the moon going into Cancer, this is nice. This is really nice. Like this water shit, the moon's going to go into Cancer, and it's all about feeling, right? What do we feel? Are we feeling safe? Are we feeling comfortable? We're talking about a cardinal sign. We're initiating a process. We're starting something. We're ambitious. We're pivoting. And that moon in Cancer is like, I feel a certain way, and we want to look at the aspects to it, right? The moon's going to be trining Mercury, and then, well, let's kind of get into that actually. So, whoops, wrong button. So we get to Friday, because the moon will be void. It goes into Cancer on Thursday. And on Thursday night, again, it's just kind of like, there's going to be this feeling of feeling comfortable and feeling safe and nourished. I really like using the word safe, simply because this is on Thursday, the moon is applying to Mercury. Now, this is 11 p.m., by the way. So this is Thursday night going into Friday morning. The moon's going to be just trining Mercury in Pisces, where, again, things don't have to make sense. Mercury in Pisces, too, is, communicating with much more of a softer tone. Moon in Cancer trining Mercury in Pisces is, it's like when you have a conversation with someone that you knew you needed to have, but you didn't really plan on doing, and it just kind of ended up happening anyway. And maybe it was a conversation you were afraid to have, but it worked out better than you anticipated. Not that things make sense. Let me say that. Mercury's in Pisces. It's not that things are going to be clear, but the conversation itself is going to, again, when you think about water and you think about emotions, we're all like, we need that balance and that calmness inside of us to think straight. And I think this moon in Cancer trining Mercury in Pisces is like, you kind of have to address the emotional side of things in order to, find some stability here. That brings us to Friday. The moon's going to, pretty much trine Mercury first thing in the morning, and that's really it. Trines Mercury, and then the moon is kind of just hanging out. Eventually, it'll make a trine to Jupiter, but that's not going to be until Saturday. So Friday, the moon's just in Cancer. Everything's in Pisces. It's really wet. It's really soggy. Everything else is in Aquarius. So it's kind of like I always think of Aquarius and Pisces stuff as like being out on a dock somewhere in like the Great Lakes, where it's like, or like on the East Coast, where it's like really moisture. There's a lot of moisture in the air, but it's also cold, harsh, like winter's wind. That's what a lot of this looks like to me. But the moon being in Pisces, Mercury in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, it sounds like we're just kind of vibing, right? And Mars and Venus are in Aquarius, where it's like, for example, I don't think this is actually going to happen, but let's just say there's like another lockdown. I think lockdown round 2 might be a little bit easier than round 1. Like Mars and Venus are in Aquarius. Hey, we can't hang out. We can't do anything, but what can we do? Well, it's like, if there's a lockdown, there's only so much we can do. I feel like Mars and Venus in Aquarius is like, all right, we're in lockdown, whatever. Jupiter and Pisces, moon and Cancer is like, let me enjoy being at home this time rather than, hating it. And I don't really believe in the lockdowns. I hope there's not another lockdown again. I don't think there'll be one. Or at least it won't be COVID related if there is another one, because they've done it once, so they'll do it again. But I just think there's something about Friday that's just kind of vibing, honestly. Mars and Venus are in Aquarius. We're doing our thing. I think we're still feeling out like this. Venus is being enclosed by malefics here. So it's kind of like, you're going to be out. Well, here's the thing. This is something I've thought about too with this cancel culture stuff. everyone is eventually, well, because of the age of the internet and because people say stupid things. Well, same thing with like Twitter. I think a big reason I've got off Twitter for a lot of reasons, but I think it's important more people get off Twitter, because Twitter's whole way of operating is based off of attacking one another. And so its business model is literally like, and its algorithm incentivizes people to attack one another. So if you're like, for example, like Lush got off of Instagram and Twitter because they were like, our product is supposed to be about like healing and feeling comfortable, and like there's nothing about that you have on social media. So like, why would it be on social media? And I look at the kind of cancel culture stuff and the, us versus them mentality. And at some point you're going to find yourself on the wrong, everyone's going to get canceled until, there's only the minority is the people who have been not canceled. And I think with Mars in Aquarius, Venus, Saturn, Aquarius, a lot of this, whose side are you on? Is it this? Is it that? Same thing during the pandemic. Because I remember when the pandemic first started and there was like the first anti-mask rallies, it was like the end of the world. It was like 5 people in Huntington Beach. People thought that was like the end of the world. I just kind of look at this as we're going to be on there's going to be a side of things that you are on, not the wrong side, but you are on a side that makes you uncomfortable, and it's not going to be an easy transition. And I think there's going to take, well, again, when we have Mars and Venus go into Aquarius, you're getting kicked out, and it's going to take you a while to adjust to that. And I think there might be some hurt, there might be some resentment, but we get to this Moon in Cancer transit and this Mercury in Pisces. It's like, it's just, who fucking cares at this point? Like who cares at this point? There's so much, there's so much that has been tarnished and ruined. Like just, I think of Mercury in Pisces and this Mercury in Pisces transit and how much like lately words don't matter anymore. Like, I think it's really funny how people are like calling each other, especially in America, as if most average Americans have any idea about Russian-Ukrainian geopolitics. And they'll be like, I've seen people like telling other people like, oh, you're a puppet of Putin or something like that. And it's like shut the fuck up. Like that doesn't mean anything. It's like when people just say things because that's what they were told to say, it doesn't mean anything. It loses that. And I think we're getting, we've already been there for a long time. Words have lost their meaning, but I think Venus in Aquarius, Mars in Aquarius, Saturn in Aquarius, there's a certain point where you can bitch and moan about being outside in the cold, or there's a certain point where like, all right, I'm cold, whatever. I'll get used to it. I'll get over it. And I feel like that's what a lot of this is. There's a lot of acceptance in this too. That's why I said this earlier. We get to where are we at? Saturday. And the moon's going to make a trine to Jupiter as the sun conjoins Neptune. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I love Saturday. Love, 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 love Saturday. And again, you don't hear me say this often about water transits, but look at this. So the sun isn't actually going to conjoin Neptune exactly till like midnight. So we won't really get the full, breadth of it. But that moon shining Jupiter in Cancer, sun on top of Neptune, like straight the fuck up. So there's one, I've talked about this before too, but there's a, have you ever like taken a psychedelic or like Molly with like a lover or a partner and like, it's super amazing and healing? That's kind of like this, to be honest with you. Like sun's on top of Neptune. Well, like the sun's on top of Neptune, and Neptune, you have to remember, it distorts it. And again, I talk so much shit on Neptune, but like the sun on Neptune is like, this isn't a day to see clearly. Like I think a lot about the sun on Neptune is like taking a flashlight and holding it under a murky water. At a certain level of depth, you're just not going to see the light. You know what I mean? And that sun and Neptune, or like, for example, if you've got a really gross, nasty pool and you've got lights in that pool and you turn on the lights, it will like kind of light things up, but nothing is clear. In fact, well, it's the same thing with turning on your bright lights in the middle of if you're driving in the fog and you turn on your brights, it makes things harder to see. Versus you have to turn on your fog lights. You have to see, and the fog lights on a car are placed underneath the grill and it lights up the road underneath rather than just blaring the fog in front of you. That's how I look at the Sun Neptune thing. And it's really important about where you put your lights, where are you placing the light? Because Sun conjoining Neptune is you can just make everything much more blurrier and foggier than needed to. But if you turn on your fog lights and you're lighting up the right thing, you will still be able to see the path in front of you. The reason I brought up like the whole psychedelics Molly thing with your lover is like Moon in Cancer, trining Jupiter and Pisces is so like, Dude, this is very forgiving energy, which sounds kind of crazy because again, we're in this very unforgiving world right now. But this is also my theory. I think Saturn and Pisces is everyone going to be like, it's cool to forgive, and Jesus is going to come back into style. But Moon trining Jupiter with the Sun and Pisces is just like, man, sometimes you just have to fucking feel things. Sometimes you just have to like, there are times and places for emotional moments. I'm a big believer of like, well, for example, when my dad passed away, I was in a position where I couldn't be like emotional for everything because I had 10,000 fucking things to do and take care of. But I allowed myself, I really allowed myself, like the day of my dad's funeral, I was like, I'm going to let myself like cry and feel whatever I got to feel because that's the time and place for it. Right. And I kind of look at this as like, if you have something going on, if you have like, for example, it's the same thing like tension in a relationship and maybe you're not talking, like this is the day to talk about it. And again, it's not even about, I think this is just about like feeling things, not necessarily like, oh, we need to communicate it's Mercury and Pisces. You just need to fucking say how you feel and it may not even come out right. And that's okay because language and communication, most of it's nonverbal. And I love Mercury and Pisces for that. Is like, stop worrying about the words. Stop worrying about, Mercury and Aquarius is like, cite your sources. Where are the sources for that? And well, blah, 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 blah. Just shut the fuck up. Like Mercury and Pisces, just say what you say how you feel, and you'll deal with the rest of that shit later. And I just look at this Moon shining Jupiter. There's so much forgiveness. There's so much like trust too. I think so much about trust. And I think so much about the South Node in Scorpio. And in order to like trust, you have to surrender like defensiveness, or like in order to trust, you have to surrender pain. In order to trust, you have to surrender, resentment and the things that were done to you, right? That's why we distrust. It's a safety mechanism. And I look at this Moon in Cancer, trining Jupiter and Pisces, like this is a safe place. Like I think of, there's this, I forgot where I saw this. I think it was a documentary about psychedelics. And there's this like therapist girl who literally like, she holds therapy sessions for couples and she gives them like fucking MDMA and they pretty much have like a cry sesh together. And she's like, I fucking fix all my happy couples. And it's like, that is a safe place for something like that to happen. And this is like South Node in Scorpio, so like disarming. South Node in Scorpio, so like surrendering, letting go of that pain, that resentment, that what, holds it down. And that Moon in Cancer, trining Jupiter and Pisces is like, this is one of those moments where it's like, have you ever like been really emotional into something and you weren't going to cry and then like someone said something and you just like fucking snapped? This is it. Saturday, you're probably, if you're a crybaby, you're definitely going to fucking have the waterworks on Saturday. But I think this is good. This is a needed one. And I think the Sun on top of Neptune, though, I want to come back to the Sun on top of Neptune, is just really romanticizing it, really enjoying it. I don't think things are going to be clear. The road ahead is not clear. There is fog in the way. But just slow down a little bit, right? You don't need to be driving a million miles an hour in the fog. Just take things one step at a time, turn on your fog lights. And you got to be looking at, for example, when you're watching a movie, like rather than watching a love movie and being like, oh, like this is fake and this would never happen. Like let yourself feel the emotions. I'm such a Libra moon. I'm like, you got to feel it. Let yourself feel shit on this day. And I think that Sun on top of Neptune is like, there's something about music and cinema. What I love about movies and cinema, even though I'm not really that big of a movie nerd, is, for example, I color grade my own film. I shoot at when it comes to videography, there's like point and shoot and you can just do the basic settings, or you can do like, I'm color grading, I'm shooting Kelvin, I got all my like shit together. And those subtle changes in how something is perceived can completely change the emotional nature of something, especially when you get into like color grading film and, filters. Like people understand it with Instagram. A picture on Instagram can make you feel differently based off of the filter that you put on it. And that's what a lot of the Sun Neptune is like, but rather than being like, oh, this is all filtered and not real. Like I think of also too with Neptune and nostalgia, Neptune and Pisces. I have, in fact, actually, I'm a big fucking nerd of nostalgia, and I bought an iPod Classic. I bought it off Etsy. It's a terabyte iPod Classic with a gold back. I fucking love this thing. And I think a lot about Neptune and nostalgia, and I listen to a lot of Vaporwave. And I've been listening to a lot of Vaporwave actually really recently. And if you don't know about vaporwave is kind of like the music trend, at least kind of my generation started. And what it is essentially like chopped and screwed 80s, 90s music that's kind of like edited to make it sound more nostalgic than it is. And it's pretty, and I just kind of look at like, I've been listening to a lot of it, and it was the same thing for like if you were born in like even like the 80s or the 90s, listening to 60s music. It's like that was music that was not in your time or your generation, but you can still get that feeling from it. I just look at Saturday as like, what is the feeling? And I think this is like, you know, I could listen to this vaporwave stuff and be like, oh, this is edited. This isn't actually how it sounds. Or I can focus on what the artist is trying to make me feel. And I think that's what Saturday's about. So then we get to Sunday. I got to wrap this up. This is actually a lot. I thought this was going to be a short one because not a lot's going on. Sun's still going to conjoin Neptune. Sun's still going to conjoin Neptune pretty much as we wake up into the morning. But then the moon's going to go into Leo, go opposite Mars and Venus. So that's actually pretty exciting. So the sun actually conjoining Neptune on Saturday night. Saturday night, write it on your calendars. A lot of you know what's up. A lot of you know what's up. So just saying, Saturday night's a great night to do a lot of things. Anyway, sun's still going to be on Neptune for the most part of the morning. So maybe get a little bit of that Molly afterglow. I don't condone drugs. But the moon's going to go into Leo where, again, like the Molly afterglow, like, well, it's like one of those things. Have you ever had like literally like a conversation you knew you needed to have, but you didn't want to have because you have to talk about your emotions and that's hard. But then you do it and you're like, wow, holy fuck, that felt fucking great. Like I feel fucking liberated. That's the moon going into Leo is like when you can just validate how you feel and you can be in that, right? Like I think it's really easy to resist how we feel versus that moon in Cancer, trining Jupiter in Pisces. You know, you have that conversation, you get that heart to heart that we need, that connection, and that moon goes into Leo where you're like, man, I'm on fucking top of the world. And the moon's going to go opposite Mars and Venus in Aquarius. So it's going to be like, Sunday there's going to be a lot of arguing in my opinion on Sunday. The reason being is the moon in Leo is like, you might be feeling super prideful and like on one, but it's going to be opposite Mars and Venus in Aquarius, especially Mars in Aquarius. I've been talking a lot about the Leo and Aquarius dynamic lately is like individualizing yourself. And there's a time, like when everything's in Aquarius, there's a time where you go like, okay, what side of this do I understand? Who am I with on a lot of this stuff? What is the community and the stuff that I understand versus the Leo is like, you know, you might have a group of people that you agree with and that you identify with, but then there's also your own individual personal opinions on things and the way that you see things and the divide between you, the individual versus the group, right? You might be a part of a certain subset of group, but you are still a unique individual that has their own, you know, way of doing things. This moon in Leo opposite Mars in Aquarius is, you know, definitely going to be a little of a conflict with that. Moon in Leo is we're going to feel the sense of individuality, the sense of pride, the sense of ego and our identity, but it's going to go against this Mars in Aquarius. And like, unfortunately, I think a lot of this Mars and Venus, Saturn, Aquarius is like, you are going to go this way, whether you like it or not. Like lockdown happened, social distancing happened, whether we liked it or not. Mars in Aquarius is like, why aren't you agreeing with us? Why aren't you on our side? I think of that Seinfeld episode. Who's not wearing the pin? Of the AIDS walk. I think that's what the episode was. Anyway, you are going to have people that say, oh, you're not allowed to be an individual. You have to be with us. Again, both of the malefic planets are in Aquarius. So there's a lot of bad energy coming from this whole Aquarius stuff of the group think. And are you on this side or that side? The whole binary. It's amazing to me how much in this day and age people, you know, well, it's frustrating that there could be 10,000 genders, but everything else, people can only look at you in a binary. You're either a Republican or a Democrat. You're either left or you're right. But it's just, I can't fucking stand it anymore because everything is just on this binary spectrum and it's fucking dumb. I think this moon in Leo opposite Mars in Aquarius though is, you're going to probably like fight against that individual versus a group collective thing. Mars in Aquarius, like I said, it's kind of like rogue shooter going out on your own. Maybe that moon in Leo trining Mars in Aquarius. You know, like I said, maybe we're doing something like we're out on our own. We were pushed out on this way that we kind of had to do. But this moon in Leo opposite Mars, maybe there's a lot more acceptance with it. Maybe there's a lot more like maybe even pride in it. I don't know how that's going to look. But what's interesting is, again, the moon's going to hit Leo, go opposite Mars, and then immediately go opposite Venus too. Now, Venus in Aquarius is is wanting to connect, wanting to enjoy this process. But the thing is, she's in between Saturn and Mars. Imagine you are a woman and you are on a bus and next to you is Mars and the other person to you is Saturn. Tell me how comfortable you feel. That's this. So I don't sure, Venus is in Aquarius, sure, woo, we're on the bus, but I'm sitting next to fucking Mars in Aquarius, this ex-Vietnam vet, fucking, and then Saturn in Aquarius being this guy that's going to judge me with every little fucking thing that I do. So I think the moon in Leo is like I said this in maybe last week or the week before that, of that clip of that guy dancing. And you know what? You're just going to have to do your own fucking thing and people aren't going to really like it. People are going to hate you no matter what. And I think with this Mars, Venus, Saturn, Aquarius is the group stuff it was already bad to begin with, but then we had the Mars, Saturn, Aquarius, and it was you're either this side or that side. And that's only going to get ramped up even more at this point. And in my opinion, it's time to let go of that shit. There's just no point into it. And I think this moon in Leo opposite Mars, I would warn you to not get caught up in the bullshit. The bullshit being, no matter what your opinions are on anything that's going on in the world, the media wants you to divide yourself between you and the people that you live with. And I think this moon in Leo opposite Mars in Aquarius, it's going to be really easy to get gaslit and to get manipulated into being a pawn of the bigger people. Because again, they don't want us to be all in unison. They want us to be divided because then they could stay in power and control. Because this is a class war. A lot of people still think this is a race war, and it's actually a class war. And guess what? A lot of you are actually on the class that you don't think you are. And I just look at this moon in Leo. It's our emotions are going to be really tied up into our ego. I think the other thing is the sun's on top of Neptune. Things aren't necessarily clear at this moment. And the moon's in Leo going opposite Mars in Aquarius is you don't need to fucking attack people. Your emotions can be used against you. And I really look at it as this is an opportunity to check yourself. And I'm telling myself the same thing here too. I'm definitely not perfect. I'm super guilty of this stuff too. I just look at this as it's going to get really easy to get wrapped up into well, I'm right versus them. And what's super funny, I guess, with this whole political polarized divide thing, what's funny about both sides is they're both equally invested into proving the other side wrong, which I don't know. There was meaning into that, but at this point, it's just who fucking cares anymore? We're all fucking wrong, and everything's meaningless at this point. Maybe that's just me being a little bit darker than that needs to be, but I think that gives me hope that everything's meaningless because this moon in Leo opposite Mars and Aquarius is you can argue all you want on social media, you can feel how you feel all you want, but guess what? The group of people don't give a fuck. Saturn and Mars in Aquarius is this commute. Well, for example, let's talk about this Reject Hill thing. Moon in Leo opposite Mars in Aquarius is okay, maybe you don't feel, maybe you're with the rejects, but maybe you go I don't really necessarily feel I agree with this kind of thing. Well, Saturn and Mars in Aquarius, the rejects will kick you out too. That's just the way I kind of look at it. So I think with the moon in Leo, I think there is this sense of feeling prideful, feeling good, but just, you don't need to fucking start an argument with everyone. You don't need to separate yourself from everybody. Check your emotions, because the moon opposite Mars is going to be very confrontational. But I think with Mars now being in Aquarius with Saturn in Aquarius, it's just not that easy to just be oh, let me just go off on somebody. Mars is going to eventually get to the Saturn. Mars is eventually going to conjoin Saturn, and it's not going to be good. So it's just important to, I kind of look at this stuff and I just try to say, what, again, what's good advice? I think good advice on Sunday is just don't let your emotions get the best of you. Even if you're feeling good and you're feeling on top of the world, don't let it get the best of you. Don't let the outside world and other people's opinions, and especially what side of the thing you're on, and, are you virtue signaling this or are you virtue signaling that? Or do you think this or do you think that? Don't get into that, because I think over the next few weeks, that's only going to get worse until we get into Pisces season. So anyway, 53 minutes. I always think this is going to be a slower one, and it ends up being longer. Next week, Mercury's going to sextile Uranus. Happy accident. Full moon in Virgo, liking that. Venus is going to square Uranus. I don't know how I feel about that yet. We'll see what the Fed ends up doing. But the sun's going to go into Aries, and we start spring. Next week looks much more livelier. Next week looks Again, we're in Pisces season, so we're in that shift mentality. Venus is going to square Uranus, so clearly what is consistent is also going to shift. Sun's going to go into Aries, where we're starting a whole new season. We're starting the technical new year. Next week looks great. I think a lot of this week is just kind of feeling it out, letting yourself feel things, not making up opinions. Like Mercury's in Pisces, Mars and Saturn in Aquarius, just like, I don't know, ignore everything and do your own thing and do what you got to do to make yourself feel good. Because I think that's going to be the biggest thing with this Aquarius stuff is like, you got to put yourself, Mars being about fights and conflicts and Saturn being about like authorities together in Aquarius of like communities and groups of people. It's like, if you want to be in the loud noise and in the storm, go ahead, but it's just not serving anything. So I think a lot of this week is, how can you decompress? How can you not make up like stories about things? How can you be more in the moment? Again, that Mercury in Pisces is just like, just let things play out. Let it happen. Don't make up assumptions. Just let it go. And we'll get to the other side of this. And I think that's so important, especially too, God, with this Russia-Ukraine stuff. It's like, just I don't know. Can everyone just fucking stop having opinions about things? And I know you guys are probably thinking about that because I know a lot of you don't like my opinions, but I appreciate that you watch this anyway. I just think it's going to be really important this week to chill out. It's a very emotional week, and I think if you are not in check with that, your emotions can really drive negative behaviors. Or if you allow yourself to disconnect and detach from this stuff, I think this is going to allow you a really intimate moment with your emotions, which is good. So I'll leave you guys with that. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below of what this week has in store for you. And with that being said, see you next week.